Good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are in the world and whenever you're watching this. My name is Imran Hussain, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to the first online session of the Google Cloud Data User Group, a meetup that's all about sharing, learning, and being inspired by uses of data on Google Cloud. So firstly, I hope everyone is okay and well, safe and well in this COVID-19 lockdown. I realize that all of us are in different stages of this, and it's been a very challenging time for everybody. But I hope that it's also an opportunity for all of us in our own little way and in our own capacity to try and change things for the better. And I thought, as a community that has a very specific professional interest, starting up a user group like this would be a way of reaching out and coming together and going forward on some common vision and values. So firstly, housekeeping. I'll be wrapping this webinar up within the hour. I want to make this session as interactive and as engaging as possible, really get that buzz of a physical meetup going. So you can ask questions at any time using a online software called Slido, Slido.com. So it provides a way of asking questions interactively, and we'll also be running some fun interactive polls. GCP data is the event code. I suggest everyone gets in there, logs in, and has a window rocked up, ready to go. This session is also being recorded, and it's going to be posted on this channel. And on that note, I'd really recommend, and in fact ask, that everyone subscribes so you can follow the videos that will be posted here. We've got some amazing talks happening over the next weeks and months. These include the use of Data Vault on BigQuery, getting savvy with CI/CD on a Composer data pipeline using PyTest, and running a big table in production and some of the issues that arise from that. So a real mix, and there'll be others coming as well. Don't miss any of them. Subscribe. I hope I'm putting in the right direction. But anyway, subscribe on that button. Thank you. We have a great agenda today. I'll be starting with a brief intro to the user group and how you can get involved. We'll then kick off the main topic of looking at Looker, no pun, from a BI perspective. Specifically, 3 ways in which I think Looker, it really stands out, and taken together makes it a really unique and game-changing BI platform. We're very fortunate to be joined by Sebastian Fabri from Google, a Looker expert who will take us through Looker from an architectural perspective and also show a really interesting retail demo. And we'll wrap up with a Q&A. And to reiterate the point, Slido, enter any questions as they come, and we'll address them during the session. We'll certainly try and get through them at the end. And finally, we'll be closing out with details of a great masterclass of Looker and GCP. So a packed session to get through. We'll start with a poll to really get a feel of what interests you, and that's going to be very useful for us as a community. There's what are the subjects across the data disciplines that are most interesting to you, and business intelligence and data engineering pop out as the pretty much in neck and neck lead. Trailing off for going further down machine learning, data architecture, CI/CD, and so forth. So really interesting mix. I suspect BI is probably splitting the data warehousing vote. We'll go to the next question. So thank you for those who entered into that, which is, what are the top 3 GCP services that most interest you? There's quite a few. But I suspect that most of us will have an intuitive draw to the services that we use the most. So I'll give everyone a few moments to put in their items, and interesting. So it's ML's in the lead, MLAR platform, BigQuery following closely. Composer's taking the lead. Okay, some data engineers in the house. Neck and neck, BigQuery, Composer, ML Engine, followed by Dataflow, and then Datastore, Kubeflow, and some of the other services. But BigQuery takes the lead. No surprise there. And I'll leave the poll open just for everyone to let it finish off. So great, thank you for that. And again, it really gives a good idea of the distribution of people's interests and usages on GCP. So moving onwards. A quick intro. I've been working with data for 20 years. I started out in SAP, it's pretty much where I cut my teeth, in data warehousing, BI. And since then, I've gone on to use and build solutions on most of the, well, all of the major data ecosystems in some way. And one of the things that's drawn me, and I suspect many of us, to the Google Cloud is the way it places data center stage. The services are constantly forward-looking and they make sense. That said, there are still a lot of services out there and they're growing and evolving all the time. And that can be confusing because there's so many ways of using the platform. It can be a particular challenge. It can also be a particular challenge given the pace of Google's innovation. So I would say the first objective of this user group is to build a practical understanding of how to make the best use of data services on Google Cloud. And in that sense, I think we all have interesting perspectives and knowledge and experiences that we can share. And we can get some wisdom of the crowd going to see more of the connections and possibilities of using this tremendous platform to move forward. The second dimension of the user group is us. As data practitioners, we're often working in silos. And one of the peculiarities of data is that there's a deep interdependency that exists between our different respective disciplines. So the second objective of the user group is to try and build up a unified view of how these disciplines work around Google Cloud services. So the more we understand of each other's context, the better we become in our jobs. How will the group work? The primary focus is data. So that's going to be the lens through which we explore and present topics and usages on this meetup group around the Google Cloud. We'll be doing that through the usual community activities, sharing knowledge and examples through online presentations, facilitating masterclasses or microclasses, and doing hackathons on BigQuery, TensorFlow. I know other user groups are doing that as well, but if there's anything that's particularly data specific, we can rock something up. And finally, we try and stay practical. Often theory and reality can be two different things. And by focusing practical usages, we can avoid gotchas and be inspired by extending our designs in different ways. I suspect this meetup group is going to be online, going to remain online for the foreseeable future, given the current situation. And I'll give details at the end of how you can take part and present on the group. Oops, excuse me. Moving on then to the main piece of the evening, which is Looker. So Looker is a pretty new BI platform. It was formed in 2012, which is like yesterday in enterprise software terms. And it's gone from its inception through to being part of the world's largest data platform in almost next to no time. I thought it was great, but I thought it was a really interesting acquisition by Google because enterprise BI, in my opinion anyway, was always the missing link in Google's offering. So it's a really exciting capability that's now come on board. So before diving into the Looker subject, I'd like to ask one more question on the poll, and that's really get an understanding of where all of us are on our Looker journeys. So going back to Slido, I'll open the next poll, which is, where are you on your Looker journey? Pretty straightforward options. I hope we'll be able to answer pretty clearly as to which category we fit into. And again, I'll give a few moments for the submissions to come in, and we have a interesting interplay there. So the bias seems to be towards being interested and want to learn for personal development. And I think that makes sense. I suspect many of us are coming at this from a Google Cloud perspective, and certainly practitioners of Google Cloud, unless you've been using Looker from a marketing perspective, it will be a relatively new tool. So great. That's interesting to know. So interested, personal development, already using it, and want to learn from my current work. So to begin then, I'm going to show a very brief snippet that I've put together from last year's Google Cloud conference, Looker Join conference. It would be Google Cloud Next this year. And here Lloyd Tabb, the founder, and Frank Bien outlined their reasons for joining Google.
You know, this particular relationship has been going on for 4 or 5 years. I always say, like, for these to be successful, you have to date before you get married. And you know, there was a lot of, you know, just real value for customers created in the field between the two companies. So that really said, okay, this is something that could work. And then I kind of went through some of the other synergies, but I think those are very real. You know, it's interesting products that we can build together. You know, it's this culture that's shared in a lot of ways.
I've always been impressed with Google because they build great software that serves users really well. Their focus is organize the world's data and make it useful, right? And ours is empower people through the smarter use of data, right? So the missions are really aligned. You know, they're an intellectual culture. They're a nice culture. I'm super excited about actually working with them, and then together I think it'll be amazing.
I hope you found that interesting. Maximize the slide. Beyond hearing the reasons from the horse's mouth, as it were, I picked that up because I thought the philosophy of the tool, which is really people and organizational culture centric, comes through in their personalities. And Lloyd made a really interesting point on the smart use of data. And that, I think, sums up the way Looker approaches data, which is as a data platform, which is being smart. I'm now going to talk through 3 aspects of Looker. I'm going to distill these into 3 aspects, which I think make Looker stand out as a data platform. As I said earlier, taken together, they do something which I think is really, really hard to do, and that's instill a data-driven culture and vastly accelerate the value with which organizations can get value from data. And that's why it's such a revolutionary platform. I'm conscious that sounds salesy, so let's make it concrete. So setting the stage for BI today, you can pretty much generalize all BI applications, Looker included, into some mix of a server cloud-side component, some form of developer tooling, and a front end, usually web-based, to present the outputs. Let's now shine a light on what makes Looker different and what it brings to the table. So the first point is that it introduces a cloud-native semantic layer. So, and excuse me for those who are familiar with this already, this is essentially an abstraction of data that's expressed in Looker's case, a fairly high-level, easy-to-learn declarative language called LookML. That language is used to model the data, and it's these models that act as data sources by front-end outputs, such as dashboards. By introducing a semantic layer, 2 profound things have happened. One is the form and storage of the data has been decoupled from its usage. And secondly, the focus has shifted from the physical structure of the data to its meaning in the business. So on the consumption side, the BI team is free to model the data directly in the LookML layer without necessarily having the final definitions materialized in the data warehouse. So that allows models to be prototyped and released to production quickly without necessarily the data engineers getting involved. And then at the right time, that can be pushed down into the data warehouse layer. On the data engineering side, the data engineers have the flexibility to manage changes to their pipeline. And in fact, they can even swap out the entire database, the entire data warehouse, with minimal disruption to the semantic layer or the dashboards. So the two have huge freedom to operate around their respective concerns. The second element, the second profound change introduced by the semantic layer is that, as I mentioned, on the data consumption side, the conversation has shifted from building reports and dashboards to the meaning of data. Because LookML is so easy to use, the business is getting more engaged with shaping the data and their ability to experiment with it. So there's a far greater engagement and fusion of roles between BI and business. So in summary, the semantic layer gives freedom for the business to get insights quickly and do that through rapid iteration. And that the point of rapid iteration equally applies to on the data engineering side as well. The second element in which I think Looker is unique is its open architecture. So Looker has an architecture which allows embedded dashboards to be embedded in web applications. That's pretty much standard stuff. In terms of how Looker goes beyond that, let's look at the final mile in terms of data refinement and how how external APIs can tap into that. So data scientists and statisticians can now use Python and R through native APIs to tap directly into the BI layer within Looker. So this pattern has huge implications. It means we're only having to wrangle the data once, and it's ready to be used everywhere. Data scientists typically spend a lot of time and energy getting hold of and preparing data. Usually they're navigating around the data warehouse with either too much or too little access. And they now have easy yet still completely governed access to clean data at any level of aggregation with any degree of richness supported by the underlying data models. And for us data scientists, that's nirvana. And because the data is so clean and consistent coming from the BI layer with business processes, any models with the underlying physical link can be plumbed into operationalized usage really quickly. Developers can use a native Java and TypeScript API to directly tap the BI layer. So you can now build cloud native applications that directly interact with customers, external suppliers, and other partners using your primary reporting set of data from your data warehouse. So you can really go to town in terms of building data-driven products, and that's a huge enabler for innovation. And finally, there's also native APIs for Swift and Kotlin, allowing an organization to tap the BI layer directly for native mobile experiences. So again, that's massively powerful for companies undergoing digital transformation or trying to provide seamless customer experiences. So you can see how that single LookML model is the gift that keeps on giving. And these are patterns that no other BI tool can deliver with anywhere near the same level of ease and efficiency. And going back to the cultural point, you now have the foundation of a community, which is a common language. You've got stakeholders right across the organization interacting with the data using the same terms, the same expressions, and you can see how a data-driven and a collaborative culture is being formed by the ability to use data in that very universal and democratized sense. And you have conversations happening that haven't happened in the past. So to summarize, the open architecture brings massive value from data and allows organizations to really collaborate around data in a way that simply hasn't been possible using some of the more traditional patterns. And finally, reusable blocks. So this is something which is unique to Looker in terms of the granularity and the modularity of which you can take off-the-shelf blocks of logic. This can be business logic, data sources, public data sets, transformation patterns, custom visualizations, embeddings, and plug them straight into your BI solution. So that means a team can get up and running in next to no time. And not only are you now creating a way of sharing content within your private organization community, but there's a whole Looker community of content that you can tap into. And there's a pretty good chance that whatever you're trying to do, someone's already done it and shared it. So you can just take that off the shelf, customize it, tweak it as needed, and you're up and running with a ready-to-go solution. And that's the value of creating something once, using it anywhere, and having fewer overall assets to manage and the ability to show them broadly and easily. In summary, massive value from data. So without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Sebastian Fabri. I'll bring him into the studio. Oh, he's already here. Hi, Sebastian. Good afternoon. I'll do a quick intro, Sebastien. Sebastian Fabri is a sales engineer for Looker and works with strategic partners. So we actually work together in my day job. He's worked directly with enterprise adopters to help them change their approach to BI, advising on data analytics and data strategy. Sebastian, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure to have you.
Yeah, I've been I spent about 5 years with Looker now, so hopefully I can bring a bit of context and also kind of show you guys how everything works, both from the pure Looker point of view, but also how they can work with GCP now. For me, there's really kind of two goals to this demo, and we'll cover that in a second. So first of all, kind of the quick summary of what Looker is, right? And so since the acquisition of Looker by Google, which was finalized a couple of months ago now, really where Google Cloud is positioning Looker as the cloud-native enterprise data platform. And the goal there is to obviously secure access, but we want to do that for near real-time data where it's needed. So that really just goes alongside what Imran was explaining already earlier on the call. So that's kind of the short and sweet statement, one slide and done. Now, if you look at a slightly bigger picture of what GCP is offering, it's a much broader list of solutions, and Looker really fits sort of like at the end of this offering. You're able to get all this data from wherever you want it, wherever it currently lives, into the GCP environment. You're able to enrich it, you're able to understand, so treat it, and use AI, etc., all the way from the sourcing of this information to the delivery into BigQuery or other data stores. And even once it's there, you can keep this journey. Looker is going to be there to really allow you to go further in terms of where do you want to make this data available. Do so in a way that's very governed so that everyone speaks the same data language. And also do that in a way that's a lot more easy for non-technical folks, for business users to understand, actually be able to leverage all the work that you are doing, right? Somebody needs to be using all the work that you're putting in, and so Looker can really simplify that. So now we're saying there's kind of two things I want to achieve here. Those two things are, A, give you an understanding, an example of how does Looker actually fit within all the GCP services. And two is, how does Looker actually work? So we will inevitably go through some dashboards that will give you a flavor of that, a flavor of the integration with GCP, but also we'll definitely spend some time in the modeling layer, in the LookML, where you can actually see the code that's enabling this, that's acted on, that's used to actually leverage the services to actually access the data and then deliver it to in whichever form and format it needs to be. Now, this slide is kind of one of the one we use, and it's very close to what Imran was just presenting, right? You have lots of data sources that customers are going to want to be analyzing. Let's move that, let's centralize that into something like BigQuery, right? So that lots of you are very interested in BigQuery. That's great. Like the scalability, the power, the speed, and the number of features of BigQuery makes it a really great fit there for centralizing that information. Looker will be able to leverage all the features of BigQuery, and will be able to do that simply through SQL, right? So it's what it's meant for. So Looker connect to BigQuery, as well as a whole host of other databases. We are part of this multi-cloud approach that GCP has. You're connecting to BigQuery, sending those queries. The modeling layer allows you to describe A, what is in BigQuery, B, any transformation, any business transformation you want to apply to it. What is revenue? What is active users? How do we calculate a retention rate? All these things. And then it's a data platform because it allows you to use that logic wherever you want it to be. Yes, there is a BI dashboard aspect of it, but also there is the self-service that allows people to actually access data directly. There is the publication to external websites. There is the ability to send information to machine learning algorithms and then leverage those back inside of Looker. Getting Looker to alert you when something happens so that you don't need to worry about this. Looker will let you know when this has happened, and you can come in and look at the data or act on it. Being able to do all of that programmatically, right? Leverage APIs of Looker, so the Looker API, but also leverage the API of other applications from Looker. And do all of that from the platform that you choose, in the platform that you choose. So it's kind of rich. I wanted to, sort of as a last slide, give some ideas, some example of how we can leverage some of the features of GCP. This is far from an exhaustive list, but this is going to speak to I'm going to show some of these in the live demo, right? Talking about BigQuery, straightforward. The data is in BigQuery. We're going to access it, whether the fields are nested, whether you're clustering your table, whether you're partitioning them. No issue there. We have that very neat way of writing the SQL is going to be able to leverage that. You can combine sources, combine different data sets that GCP makes available to you for free. Using App Engine to create more complex applications, either that Looker can provide data to for the processing, or actually as the data that you want to provide and show to your customers, or maybe App Engine is actually enriching the capabilities of Looker, and I'll show you one of those. BQML, BigQuery Machine Learning, you can use that directly from Looker, right? Thanks to the SQL interface. TensorFlow, Looker can send data to TensorFlow, and you can run your machine learning model. Or maybe actually you can also call TensorFlow models directly from BigQuery ML and then make it available in Looker. Cloud Function is really whatever you can dream of, right? Write to a database, create slide deck, trigger more alerts, have special like sending SMS or changing the operation of certain machine or of certain keywords or whatever it is. And then to kind of jump a little bit out of GCP, maps, right? For example, again, what we'll be using there is the maps API, preview route, see the street view, calculate distances, etc. Even though some of these can also be done directly in BigQuery. Kind of, this is where we're lucky enough to be uniquely positioned to be able to leverage all these things and enrich the information, enrich the experience that you're delivering to your user. So simply, I'm going to try to show you some of that now over the next 20 minutes or so. So here's an instance of Looker, right? I'm connected to my browser. It's obviously cloud-based. And essentially, everyone's going to log in here. Everyone will be able to go to the same URL. And depending on who you are, you'll see different reports. You'll have access to different data. You'll have access to different features and areas of the tool. As the first step, I wanted to highlight those integrations. That's actually probably more easily done as someone that is a business user. And then I will link that when we jump to the model, when we jump to the LookML, I will link those features back, kind of show you how easily it was to implement. Now, obviously, I'm going to show you the Looker part of this. There's a the flip side of the coin, which is the GCP side of it, where have you created the App Engine, where have you created the Cloud Function and declared it, etc. I'm not going to show you that part today, but it would be sitting, in your GCP console alongside everything else as usual. So in this scenario, let's start as a CEO or at least someone fairly important in a retail company. So we're trying to understand how the business in general is doing, and starting from a very standard, a dashboard. What's interesting here, kind of like a couple of things. First of all, the way Looker is accessing the data, each of these tiles, there's actually a specific SQL query sitting behind it, which allows me, if I modify any of the filters or whenever I actually open this dashboard, these queries are being fired back to, in this case, BigQuery, for us to gather the freshest information, right? So I have to have a preview of the latest values that were known, and now it's going live and updating this with the latest numbers. And I can go and track this automatically with some of these alerts that I was talking about. So I don't need to come every morning to look at this dashboard. If it's not something that interests me, I can actually check and say, okay, I want to know if I am a certain amount below my sales target, then it's important for me to have a look at this. And so just because we're not quite there, gotta sort of scroll down and see what's happening in here. So we have a series of different stores that are doing business. San Jose seems to be lagging behind. So let's try to see more detail, or maybe I'm kind of busy, so I'm just going to send a text or call the store manager, and they can dig into that for me, right? So here's an example of calling Google App Engine. It's going to allow me to send a text message to the store owner, right? And on the other side, on the other hand, obviously the store manager getting this text, getting this message, being able to drill back into Looker, in this case, with a little bit more detail, a little bit more context, because he's so as have that more granular level to the information that's coming from his store, right? And see how things are going there. Some of these are obviously going to be very similar to what the boss was looking at, but shortened to the targets of this personal store, and then see how we're doing compared to my peers. So, simply getting data from BigQuery, being able to calculate it, being able to aggregate it in different ways, comparing, retaining granular access to my San Jose store, but still being able to see the sort of summarized data of the other ones, so that I can see what are the year-on-year sales for all the stores without actually having access to the granularity of their sales, because I'm just in charge of one store here. Another feature might be to actually combine that with other data sets that are freely available in GCP, right? Has the weather impacted my sales? How does that compare with, peer stores over here versus my trends, etc.? It seems to be fairly, standard. So in this case, it's not something that matters, but we could have maybe looked at, rain, maybe look at other trends that are being made available through Looker directly, through BigQuery, and then to Looker directly. So it's kind of like that BigQuery integration working really well. Going a little bit further, where could I save money, right? What are the opportunities with my inventory? They seem to be fairly small today. This data is kind of updating live, so some days I come here and there's 20 options, and today there's only 3. But what's interesting on this slide here is just this forecasting stock, right? What we're doing is very simply using BigQuery machine learning to forecast the demand of these items, right? And then based on that, being able to evaluate what's the value of missing stock, right? Which one should I stock more of? Which one should I stock less of, right? And it's a way of having machine learning actually being very simply leveraged by now a store owner, by a business user. They don't need to learn, they don't need to know exactly the intricacies of this model, but being able to have a forecast number here that is agreed upon by the rest of the company. And we'll circle back to this and have a look in the LookML model, how this was actually implemented. It's very, very straightforward. Going down here, same idea, more detail for different stores. I could go and actually see more information about one of these products if I wanted to to look at based on different segmentation, based on comparison, etc. It's pretty straightforward to do. I'm not going to walk you through all these examples here. Circling back, we could be using Cloud Function here to look up images of these items, for example, and adding that directly in Looker. We could be using Cloud Functions to enrich this information one way or another. And then lastly, I was mentioning TensorFlow. So for more complex cases, like here, we're trying to sort of bucket and understand the behavior of these customers. Having a TensorFlow model that can go deeper in that information and still being able to leverage it from Looker is going to be super valuable. So there was a few examples here. We talked about BigQuery, obviously. We talked about Cloud Functions. Talked about App Engine. We talked about TensorFlow. We talked about sort of the experience at a high level from a business user, right? All this kind of work has been done in the background by technical folks like yourselves. Now, sort of like to kind of bridge the gap, a user can go and ask new questions. They have this ability to go explore the data. They have this ability to actually ask those questions themselves and leverage the work that you've been doing in the model by getting access to all the fields that you've curated, all the fields that you've made available to them, and they can go and add them to these reports and add them to these calculations. It's quite simply, if I wanted to compare, again, let's compare some stores, right? Let's get some store names going. Let's see total sales over the last 30 days. That's already up there as a filter. Let's see maybe a number of customers as a total number of store. Quite simply, I can go and make those requests, and Looker is going to go and get those numbers, get those answers directly from Looker. So you have the freedom as a user to explore this information and to enrich it and add it. So I could add this also to my table and pivot my stores, for example. That's going to allow me to view this data from a different angle. Now I'll show you one last thing about well, this is almost unintelligible, but maybe we can reduce to the stores that are more specific to me. All security here is applied at the same time. So if I'm only allowed to see Philadelphia, I would only be seeing Philadelphia. Same report, same to somebody in Phoenix, they would only be looking at Phoenix information. And then lastly, if I am back to being that person in my San Jose store, and I want to be tracked and I'm going to be alerted to these automatically, it's up to you to sort of make available the destination of those integrations for the scheduling. If I could be, again, sending text messages automatically if something happens. I could be enriching data in Google Sheets. I could be starting new machine learning algorithms or feeding into them. I could be working in marketing, identifying users and sending them to certain campaigns that I'm listing. I could be tracking ROI on AdWords and going and posing them automatically if those certain thresholds are taken. And the beauty is that, yes, you can do that as a one-off and send it, but you can also have Looker sort of monitor it for you through a scheduling and kind of on the schedule go and say, as this happened, as something new happened, is there new data here that I need to send? Are certain thresholds being taken, etc. So you can start automating those workflows. All of this exists. All of this is possible thanks to the model. So what I'll do is I'll just try to hit some of those same points I was just presenting, but from the LookML side, right? So let's have a look at that. Say you were given an instance of Looker. The first thing you would do is actually go and connect that to your database, right? Whether it's BigQuery or another one, but get that connection going, straightforward JDBC connection, nothing too complicated there. Based on that, you can then go and create a model. So this is a demo instance. There's a few different ones here. Some of these you can see Marketplace. These are some of the examples of the blocks that can be automatically imported and will help with, for example, Zendesk data, or maybe Google BigQuery performance, right? Or if you have Bing ads or digital marketing, etc. All of these will be imported automatically for you. You just need to get them from the marketplace. In this case, retail is something that was developed internally, and we can have a look at what this model looked like. So a few things to know from the get-go, right? So you can already see all of this is code-based, right? Looker really leverages SQL, and so it makes sense that to be able to do that in the best way, SQL is code, let's use code as well. You will be defining all the logic that we need in these files, and then essentially making it available to the users through the interface as well as through the API. To manage all of this, we are working with Git, right? So let's say I did some work earlier that I forgot to undo, so I'm just going to go and uncommit my changes, reset back to production. Actually, my code here is not on the latest version, so I can just go and pull that. I've made it very easily for users, for developers to kind of collaborate, work together. You each have your own branch, you each are in your own sandbox. You can do all the testing that you want without messing up anything in the front end. If things get complicated, you can also create more branches and manage that like you would any workflows. But what are we looking at exactly here in the middle, right? Well, to explain what's in the middle, let's start on the left side. We connected Looker to a database. We then created this model. What's happened? Well, quite simply, you, the developer, are able to select the datasets, select the tables that you want to work with, and Looker will automatically create a representation of those tables. So all of this here is metadata, right? We haven't actually moved any of the data. It's just description of what's there. In this case, the description is the table, and then for each of the columns that exist, each of the fields will create automatically a dimension for those. And that does include nested fields for BigQuery. So you have all the information that exists in the database, existed automatically in the LookML, but you're going to need to enrich that, right? There's going to be other definition, KPIs, business logic, etc. We want to include that in here. That can be something very simple, like, say, how do I calculate my number of transaction? Or what's the definition of a percentage of customer transaction? We're defining all these elements and making them available to the business user. Let's walk through a couple of examples here, because I think it's kind of important to explain what's happening. The key thing, or the first key thing to understand, is this purple writing. So I said multiple times that Looker uses SQL. And if you look at line 104, this is kind of, you can recognize a bit of SQL there, right? No if, that's a SQL function. There's a min down there in 111, that's also a SQL function. Whenever you are describing a field, declaring a field, whether it's a measure or dimension in Looker, you can write SQL directly here. But the great thing, and what this purple writing is a reference. Everything you do is referenceable, so you only need to declare elements once. You do that once in one place, and then wherever you need it, you can just go and call for it. So you have that single definition, single source of truth, and that's how we're starting to build that governance, right? You have the governance of the field. For example, to calculate my customer transaction, I'm using my number of customer transaction. That's defined right here. It could be defined in a different file. It could be defined somewhere else in the model. You can still make use of it. You can still call for it. This calculation here is account distinct, reusing the field called transaction ID, which is simply one of the columns, or in this case, the dimension referencing the column. And to do this calculation, we kind of want to exclude orders that don't have a customer ID. So kind of like clean up the data a little bit before running this calculation. So that's the great thing, right? I declare something once, I can go and reuse it everywhere. What I find even better is what you need to do if you want to change something, right? Maybe there's other values you need to filter out, right? Maybe there's a different way of calculating transactions because the tables are changed, or maybe there's a new column, etc. If something changes, like how I want to calculate these changes, I only have one place to modify, right? I only have one place to modify this measure. It's going to flow through the rest of the model, update everywhere else I use it automatically. And it's also going to go and update your dashboards your API calls, your emails, etc. So everything stays in sync through this model. So that's kind of the first thing. You have views, and we're going to be declaring the different dimensions and measures in here. We also have a model file where we'll be declaring simply the relationship between the data sets, between the tables. How do these things come together, right? And the combination of both is what's going to be essentially controlling the interface that we're providing to people and to the API. Now let's have a look at a few things. There was, let's talk about this BigQuery machine learning model, for example. All right, so in one of the views here, the one called stock forecasting, we're actually kind of creating inputs for our model, and we're then using BQML in the same way that you would use it directly in BigQuery, and that we'll be able to leverage it. Because the beautiful thing is that BQML is going to generate those tables for us, so then we can go and use them and combine them with the rest of our data. So what are we talking about here, right? We need to do a stock forecasting, and we're going to do that using BQML. We're going to do that using linear regression. We're trying to predict the total quantity, and then there's a few different features we can, a few different parameters that we can define. Now, the other bit that's very important is going to be the input for creating and training this model, right? That's simply defined above here. All these columns that you're seeing are coming from any of the definitions that you've already done in your model, right? So you're sort of ensuring that the input of your models is consistent with the business definition, is consistent with the rest of what your company is doing, so that everyone speaks the same data language, and your forecasts are going to be, accurate. That's up to you, but at least correct in the way that the data it's using. So we're just selecting all these fields. These are going to be all the features that we're going to be leveraging and going to be using in the model. And then BigQuery does all the hard work for us. First, generate the model, train it. Second, predict the results, right? Based on that, we're going to essentially receive a table. We have all these dimensions and measures that can be declared, and we can then join it back to the rest of the information. And now we have side by side a forecast and the actuals and what's in my stock and what's in my sales, etc. So that's a nice example of that. We were looking at store names and app engines. So let's have a quick search here for that and have a look at how that's quite simply declared in Looker. Oh, that's a dashboard. It's probably not the right place to look at that. But since it's the same retail, and see there's one here, export to Salesforce, export my data to Salesforce directly. The other one that I wanted to look at is in the product. All right, I wanted to call my category manager. Again, it does require you, yes, it does require you to have defined the app on the App Engine side, so in your Google Console. But then from Looker, being able to very easily parameterize that, being very easily enter information, pass it, call it, and kind of make that and enrich the availability inside of Looker. There's a few examples of essentially the work that you're doing in BigQuery can be leveraged. The work that you're doing in GCP can be leveraged through Looker. The Looker model is going to provide you with governance, and then this governance can be leveraged by your users very simply, can be leveraged via API, whether you want to show this internally, like we've seen so far, or even externally through, for example, portals and the such, leveraging API calls for data, making API calls using JSON in your portals, in your custom application, or even bringing the visualizations directly from Looker via dashboards and single visualizations, etc. So kind of Looker has a governance layer. Looker can govern your data, and then you can use the data in whichever format, where and when you want it. Kind of goes back to that first slide I was showing you, right? that information of what Looker is. Brilliant. So I think, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to pass this back to Imran here to go through the QA, see if we have any questions on Slido.
Sebastian, thank you very much for a really informative and interesting presentation and demo. So yes, we do have questions, and I'm going to switch over to Slido to look at them. Let's start with the ones that's been upvoted. We have 11 questions. How integrated or bound is Google to Looker? Do you need to grant permissions to Looker to be able to use it? And it's doubled up with another question of what is the cost of using Looker? I think we should break them up. So one is, how closely integrated is Looker to Google?
So the Looker has always been cloud agnostic, right? And Google has a multi-cloud strategy. So in that respect, we're going to continue to be able to serve all the clouds. That doesn't mean that we're also not going to kind of take on the opportunity to integrate with as many services and as much of the value as GCP can deliver, right? So we will sort of be able to integrate for the customers that are within the GCP product, within the GCP cloud, but it's not a pre-requirement at all to be using Looker. You don't have to be a GCP customer to be, or you don't have to be in the GCP cloud to be able to use Looker. Now, do we need to grant permissions to Looker to be able to use it? You will need to allow Looker to query your database, right? So Looker needs to be able to select data in your database to be able to access that information. I have a feeling that I didn't actually show you the SQL, which is probably a bit of a faux pas there, but literally every single report that I showed you, behind it, there is a SQL query that Looker is generating based on your model. So that SQL query needs to be able to run on your database.
Thank you, Sebastian. Just going to run through these just in interest of time, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of using Looker. I know this isn't always transparent and fixed.
So there's a few different parameters there. So there's the main focus is sort of there's a listing on the GCP marketplace that you're welcome to look at. So you can purchase it through there. But we also do offer sort of like volume discounts and those sort of things if you are if you want to have a discussion, talking with Agilexi or talking with one of our sales representative, then they can adjust pricing based on what value you're getting out of the tool.
Thank you, Sebastian. And there will be a link to download and try Looker for free towards the end of this session. The next question, Sebastian, and I think that's probably quite a popular one actually, is where does Data Studio fit around Looker?
Yeah, that's a good question, because GCP does have these two tools now, right? That we have, Google has these two tools, right? There's Data Studio that's been there for a while, and now they've acquired Looker. So there's so the right tool for the right job, I think, is the way we're approaching this. Looker is enterprise scales, right? So you need scalability, you need security, you need governance, you need to be able to deliver data in multiple places, right? We're not just talking about dashboards here. We're talking about a data platform that can be powering custom application, that can be sending you email or integrating with your other application that you already have and integrate with those. So it's kind of a lot of different features there that are simply not part of the Data Studio wheelhouse. Data Studio, on the other hand, is going to be great for sort of like the person that is a bit technical, that just probably might be working in marketing, wants to get some answers from the adverts, some answer from BigQuery data, maybe combine that with some CSV files, and mock up this dashboard and share it with a few people. So we do see this sort of coexistence in terms of Data Studio and Looker in several companies.
Thanks, Sebastian. I think that answer will be really informative for a lot of GCP users. So the next question, which has just been upvoted, is regarding the Magic Quadrant. Looker is currently in the Challengers Quadrant, according to the last recent report. What gap or step is required to move it into Leaders?
So we've been in there for 2 years now. We moved from niche to Challengers this year, which is a great progression. I think historically you've seen that a lot of the current leaders have gone through that path. So we definitely all see this as very encouraging. I don't know if I have a specific answer here, right? There is one big thing, if you simply look at the axes here, the way where we have the vertical one is execution, and then the horizontal one is completeness or vision, completeness of vision. And so let's see how Looker and GCP can do together to complete that vision, right? And kind of foster more innovation and also enrich the capabilities of Looker. And then it's kind of up to the analyst to make their mind on those things.
Thanks, Sebastian. I've got the Gartner report open in front of me, actually, and the two of the cautions are narrowness of product vision and geographic presence. And I think the fact that it's now part of Google is going to really address those in spades in terms of broadness of vision and geographic coverage. So it'll be interesting to see where Looker lands in next year's Gartner. We're short on time, so we'll try and get through as many of these as we can. I suspect not all of them. The next question is, do the reports respect permissions on the back-end tables and views in the database? Or does Looker require a separate authorization mechanism?
So either, right? You kind of get two options. Each has their advantages, disadvantages. You can either have Looker access all the data. Looker has the permission to access all the data and then applies the security within Looker that would still be integrated with your user management. So they're still linked. They're just not linked directly to the database permissions. Or you can have, depending on the database, but on BigQuery, you can have OAuth and can pass through the users and then leverage the permission of the user from the database side of things. So you have options there.
Great. Thank you, Sebastian. This will take one final question, and apologies to everyone who couldn't make it. There's been quite a few in terms of your questions. So where is it gone? Yeah. Are there customers who have Looker as part of their data science environments, or is it primarily for BI?
So definitely customers are using Looker in the data science as part of their data science, right? It's not a standalone tool for data science, but Looker will be very valuable in those environments to provide data and provide governance into the actual machine learning, right? Whichever tool you are using for your models, Looker will be able to provide the information in a governed way and save you all that data prep, all that data cleansing time. And then at the other end of the spectrum, once the data has been processed, once you have made your prediction, Looker will be great to actually present that back to the business users, right? So Looker is kind of helping on both ends, on the data prep and then on the data delivery side of things. And you guys can work for the machine learning in the tool that you are still you know the best or you're comfortable with.
Thank you, Sebastian. And I think that's probably all the time we have for questions. If there are any further questions, then you are very welcome to reach out to me on the Look side of things, and I can pass them to Sebastian, or in fact, we'll probably just answer them ourselves in terms of Agilexi. Next steps to close. So firstly, from a community perspective, from a user group perspective, you're very welcome to present a talk. Please contact me if you have anything interesting to propose in terms of any unique experiences or that you'd like to share, or anything that you think would be of interest to the wider GCP data community. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn with this bit.ly or via the Meetup organizer. Anyone feeling a bit nervous or a big bit, don't worry, we'll support you throughout the prep. I really encourage it. It's a great experience. If you're interested in Looker, great tool. We certainly drink the Kool-Aid here. I strongly suggest trying it. Here's a link where you can get a free download. Looker will know that you've come from the user group, and you can it'll opening up some additional benefits in terms of support from Agilexi. And finally, we will be presenting a masterclass on Looker, and this is something I and Sebastian, if it brings availability, will be giving. It's online, it's free, and everyone is welcome. Whether you're using it for work or, in fact, you're not working and you just want to upskill, you're very, very welcome. Come along, we'll make it happen. Sebastian, thank you very much. It's been a great first session, and we hope to hear to have you everyone on again for the next one on Data Vault on the 27th of May, I think, and I'll bring my trusty hand in again. Subscribe. Have a great evening, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice
Bye, Sebastian. Have a great evening.